Hi guys, welcome to mathspays.com. Today we're looking at the interquartile range, a little bit at 5-point summaries as well. So I'm going to start by looking at a particular set of data and looking at what interquartile range actually means and bringing in some sort of different words that you already know, such as you know the word the median, but we're also going to look in at words such as quartile 1, quartile 2, and quartile 3, etc. So, first of all, interquartile range. So we've got that word there that says quartile. Okay, so I wonder what you associate the word quartile with. Well, hopefully you might think that quartile sounds very much the same as quarter. Okay, or 1 over 4 or 25%, and that's exactly what it's referring to. Basically what an interquartile range does, well, the first steps of it, is to split this set of data into 4 quarters. Okay, because then once it's in 4 quarters, we can start looking at the first 25%, the second 25%, the third 25%, or the last 25%, which we can then break into like 50 percentiles or 75 percentiles. There's a lot of information that this will allow us to do. So, how do we split this into quarters? Well, first of all, I'm going to look at, I guess, halfway. Because if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that number there is exactly halfway. And the reason for knowing that is what is a half of a half? Well, hopefully you know that a half of a half is in fact a quarter, and that's what we're trying to do. So, the first steps are to find halfway. Okay, we want to find the halfway point. And basically we also know that the halfway point, or the middle number, is referred to as the median. Okay, so that number there is what we refer to as the median. So again, what you might do, you might cross 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're crossing numbers off both sides and left with that 7 in the middle, and that's our median. So we can put that median over here. That's going to be number 7. Now the next step is that we want to find a half of that amount as well. Okay, because we already said a half of a half is a quarter. So that number there, that's already been used. Okay, that was our median. So what we've actually got is the left-hand side of that. I can find the median. Now, what did we say when we cross those numbers out and we now have 2 middle numbers? How can I find halfway of that? Now you might recognize and go, well, hold on, that's 3 and that's 5, therefore wouldn't 4 sit in between? And that's absolutely correct. If you're not sure, the quickest way is adding them together, which is 8, and 8 divided by 2 equals 4. So that's a really quick way of doing it if you're not too sure. But we've got this middle number here, and that's our quartile, our first quartile, and that's going to be 4. So actually we refer to that as quartile 1. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the right hand side. Once again, the 7 has been used, so I'm going to cross out the 8, cross out the 10. I'm left with a 9 and a 9. What's halfway between 9 and 9? Well, hopefully you might just think, well, it's the same number, wouldn't it just be 9? And that's correct. Once again though, if you're not sure, 9 plus 9 divided by 2, because we're finding the average of those two numbers, that equals 18 over 2, which equals 9. So you can see that's there. And we call that our third quartile. So I guess what you might ask is, well, what's your second quartile? Well, actually, you know what? That second quartile is actually the median. Okay? They are one and the same thing. Now, one of the main questions that I get, well, hold on, shouldn't there be a fourth quartile? Okay? Because there are 4 quarters in a whole. And in fact, what we're actually doing, and I'm going to try and show this in blue, that if I split this up into a quartile on the left-hand side, what you'll notice, I've got the left-hand, I've now got that kind of middle part there, then I've got this right-hand part, and then I've got that right-hand part. By splitting up into using those 3 different sections, we've actually got 1, 2, 3, we got 4 quarters. It's like breaking a line and saying, can you break it up into four equal pieces? You break it in 3 different sections, don't you? That gives me the 4 quarters, and again we call that quartile 1, quartile 2, and quartile 3. Something to note, guys, one of the most important parts of this is to make sure too that your numbers are in order. Because obviously if they were random, then it wouldn't matter where the numbers would be, because the median could be any number. But of course, we must have it from lowest to highest. Okay, now we've mentioned about these are my quartiles, so what on earth do you think is the interquartile range? Well, if you think back to our previous lessons, what was the rule for the range? Well, the range was the highest score minus the lowest score. So what might interquartile range be? Well, that's your highest quartile, in this case quartile 3, minus the lowest quartile, quartile 1. So we can also say this is the upper quartile minus the lower quartile. There's different ways of saying that the highest quartile minus the lowest quartile. But in this case, that means our IQR is equaling to 9 take away 4, which equals to 5, which means that my quartiles range between 5 different numbers, and that makes sense because look, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that ranges by 5 numbers. You can see that spread there. I mentioned this word called a 5-point summary. A 5-point summary is simply these 3 pieces of information, and all they do, they add in the lowest number, which is 2, the highest number, which is 10, and that just gives me a nice bit of information about what the lowest number is, quartile 1, 2, and 3, and what that highest score is, and that just gives you a bit more information. We don't do a whole lot at the moment on our interquartile range in terms of our 5-point summary, but later on we start drawing some pretty fancy graphs called box and whisker plots, but that's a little bit later on. Okay, now I've used even numbers. The next challenge for you guys is basically going to give you some questions, and I'm going to ask you to have a crack at this. Now the first question, I've used odd numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Sorry, and that's what I used last time. I used odd numbers. So that should be the same process as you just did. But this one, I've given you even numbers, okay? That will be slightly different. I want you to have a crack at it and just see if you can do it. If you can't, obviously press play and I'll show you how to do it. All right, so make sure you press pause, have a crack at it, and I'll see you in a moment. Okay, welcome back, guys. So hopefully you've had a good crack at this. So the first one, remember we said we want to find our Q1, our Q2, and Q3. It says a 5-point summary, so I'm going to put my lowest in there as well. I'm going to put my highest score in there. And they're the 2 easy ones because you can see the lowest is 2 and the highest is 12. And of course, they are already ordered, so I don't need to reorder them. Okay, so can you remember, first step we want to find the median. So I'm going to cross halfway. Perfect, so there's 4 either side. My median, okay, is 7. That's my Q2. Now, because I use that number, I'm going to look at the numbers to the left-hand side of it, because remember, a half of a half is a quarter. So I'm going to cross these out, 1, 2. I've got 2 middle numbers. Oh, that's the same as last question. That will be nice and 4 because 4, it's 3, 4, 5. But again, if you weren't sure, add them together, which is 8, divided by 2, we still get 4 as our answer. So our Q1 is 4. I'll do the same on the right-hand side. So I'm going to cross the 9 and the 12 out. Now this time I'm left with 9 and a 10. What's halfway between those two? Well, that's going to be 9.5. If you're not sure, add them together and divide by 2, and your calculator will give you the answer of 9.5. So that's my Q3. So straight away, you can see what we've just managed to do. I'll circle this so you can see a bit more, a little bit easier. We've got our 5-point summary, and our interquartile range will be our highest minus our lowest. Oops, no, I did my highest score. That's the actual range, wasn't it? I'm doing my highest quartile, 9.5, take away the lowest quartile, which is 4, which gives me an interquartile range of 5.5. Okay, how'd you go with the second one? Bit more challenging because they were even numbers. So I'm going to cross 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, do you see what happens when I have even numbers? We actually have 2 middle numbers to start with, which means that my Q2 is actually going to be 6.5 because it's in the middle. Once again, if you're not sure, add them together, divide by 2, we get 6.5. So that means when I'm doing my data, LQ1, Q2, Q3, and our highest value, our lowest is 2 and our highest is 10. And we've got now our Q2 is 6.5. So the next step is I need to find the left-hand side. Now notice that I didn't use 6 or 7 as the actual quartile, which means that I'm actually still looking at what's left of 6.5 and what's right of 6.5, which means all those numbers are in play. I'm across the 2 and the 3, the 6 and the 5, and look at that, I'm left with a nice 4 as my Q1. I'm going to use the 7 and the 10, the 8 and the 8. I'm left with one number there, and that's an 8. That's my Q3, which means my IQR equals 8 take away 4. IQR equals 4. And that's my range. You can see that they range between 4 points there. Alrighty. Look guys, that's a brief introduction. You can do this with a lot of different types of graphs with 7-leaf plots, dot plots, all that kind of stuff. But at the moment, we're just working on numbers. I hope this made a little bit of sense. Go through your book, go do a few questions. Any problems, send me an email. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed.